told Jeff last week was I was like, I have no clue what parenting is because I'm not a parent, but I am a son, and so it was a really good message even for somebody like me who's not married and doesn't have kids, to really reflect on what I want in the future and how to shape that, what it looks like to have a family, and so. This message clearly, obviously, is geared towards parenting, but I felt like this is for everybody. Everybody needs to know this.
And it's good. It's good for people to hear those principles prior to having kids or prior to getting married.
Yeah.
Because now you're saying, okay, I want to marry someone who kind of has those same ideals, same values, and says, okay, this is important, and let's be united in this. Because a lot of parenting is presenting that united front. Even though you might have differing degrees of grace or whatever it might be, people carry things into into a marriage of how they were parented. And they either they rubber band to exactly how their parents did it, or else they say, well, I didn't like the way my parents did it, so they go the opposite direction. But it's never in the middle, kind of. It's always kind of one or the other. So to get that figured out before you get married with someone would be really cool.
Yeah. Oh, definitely impactful and it just helps you have a healthy marriage as well as a healthy family. But one of the things that you talked about in the 4 stages is that we have to discipline. Like discipline is a real thing when you're parenting. And what I love that you touch on Hebrews, I think 12 is what it is, that, God disciplines out of love, that to not lose heart. To not lose heart because he disciplines out of love for you. And I feel like in our world today, to hear that is really difficult because it's like, well, if I love my kid, I don't want to hurt them. I don't want to discipline them. I don't want to, because then they're going to get mad at me, or we're very hesitant when it comes to the discipline out of love. Why do you think that is?
I think some of it is that we're people pleasers by nature, especially with those who we really love, because we want them to reciprocate that love. And one way that we show love is through obedience. It's kind of like if my kids are little and I am heading out to dinner with my wife and I say, hey, now when I come home, I want to see your room clean. Okay, you can clean your room up, and then you come back home and they're at the front door. They can't wait to see you. They can't wait to see, hey. You gotta come out to my room. Gotta see my room. I'd say, oh, no, I'm not going up there. That place is a pigsty. Absolutely not. I'm not. Why would I go in there? No. You haven't seen it yet. Come, please. And they're begging you, and you're trying to put it off jokingly. And they finally get you in there, and they're as proud as can be. Well, they're proud because they've been obedient. And you want to please your Father. That's the way God wired us. And again, the parenting is this microcosm of how our relationship should be with our Heavenly Father. But, the reason we don't like discipline is because we want them to like us. And I think at other times, we don't always think through the fact that, this has consequences for their first job. It has consequences for their marriage, and so if we just give them a free pass and let them do whatever they want, then basically we're setting them up for failure because that's not the way the real world operates.
Right. That's a good way of putting it, because I feel like there's so many different young adults that will always, it's like twofold. It's either they were raised by helicopter parents where it was discipline like crazy, but there was no love in the result of it, or there was no love reasoning with it. Or you have the other side of, well, my parents tried to be my best friend, and instead I learned nothing about discipline. I learned nothing about anything at all. So when I got into the real world, it chewed me out because I didn't understand that, it's a harsh world out there. Not saying that parents have to be harsh, but to give the reality that of like, no, I'm disciplining you not because I hate you, not because I want to have an ordered house or everything needs to look perfect, but it's because I have a deep, deep love for you. And I want you not only to succeed here, but also succeed when you are gone. You talk about the how you, as a parent, you want to I can't believe I'm forgetting the word that you use, but you want it to be a progressive sending
progressive
out.
releasing.
Yes, progressive releasing, and how important
with that waffle cone.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's that gradual part. So you're giving them more and more responsibilities. Think of it like this. Think of the Washington Monument. There are
Mhm.
some parents that parent like the Washington Monument, and they have the exact same restrictions when they're little, and they keep them like that all the way through, and they never do that progressive
Mhm.
releasing. And it's great when they first start out for the little kid, but if they're still only allowed to ride their bike six doors down, and now they're 14 years old or 10 years old, we've got a problem. And so you've got to make certain that it's that progressive releasing. I think the boundaries. Jeff talked about this a little bit.
Yeah.
It does foster security within a kid,
Mhm.
and so I grew up in, I don't want to say helicopter parents, but stricter than
Mhm.
most, higher standards than most. I was a kid. I always said I never could go to the movie that everybody else could go to. I never could do this that everybody else. But but it was always motivated by love. And I had two of my best friends in high school came from broken homes, and they would make fun of me because of my curfew that I had. But they also, at the same time, would say things like, "Oh, my dad doesn't care when I come in," or "My mom could care less when I come home."
Mhm.
And they were saying true statements, and they were actually sharing with me in that statement, uh, they really don't care.
Mhm.
And so I found that they enjoyed coming over to my house, and my mom and dad might be affectionate with each other, and I was grossed out by it. If we walked in the kitchen and they're standing there, holding each other, uh, talking about the day, and I'm like, I'm grossed out, I'm embarrassed, and I mean, Brad and Rob, they thought it was the greatest thing in the world, and it was because they had never seen that.
Yeah.
They'd never seen that, and so I started to realize later, oh my gosh, I was so blessed. I was blessed to have parents who modeled, what was right, and their decisions were made motivated by love and a
Mhm.
concern for trying to do the very best that they could to pave the way for me to embrace Christ on my own.
Yeah. Wow, that's a impactful story
Mm,
and, resonates with me because, it was the same for me growing
mm,
up. And my family pastored a church in Whittier, helped pastor a church in Whittier, had different positions. And Whittier area, during that time, just a lot of broken families would
mm,
come to the church. A lot of, students that would come to youth, and then we would talk more with them, and then they
yeah.
would talk about their family life, but one of the things that I loved about my parents was that they were always welcoming to each and every student that came by,
Yeah.
and I always remembered that they would rather be at my house than their own home,
Hmm.
and it was because of the way they saw my parents and the way they just gravitated towards the love that my parents had for each other and also in the
Yeah.
broader sight. And I never understood it because, of course, me being me was like, no, I have to be home by 9 p.m. All these all these
Yeah.
rules and things that I hated, and then I would always same thing. I would hear them being like, oh, I go home like whenever I want, and my parents really
Yeah.
don't care. And I just remember being just absolutely like, I want that.
Yeah.
Like,
That's what I want.
yeah,
That's what I want.
correct.
No, it's really not
Yeah,
what you want. But at the
exactly.
time,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
you remind me of another story, if you don't mind me
Yeah, of
sharing.
course.
Um, but because you do think about the restrictions. And
Mhm.
so I think the love piece, I think I quoted Josh McDowell in the sermon. I said, rules without a relationship leads to rebellion.
Mhm.
So that relationship and the rules, it's having both of those.
Mhm.
My parents were more on the strict side, and this will sound archaic to even say out loud, but I graduated in 1979, and so that was a long time ago. And my parents did not allow me to go to dances, and so man, every time a dance rolled around, it was awkward for me. And I was a senior class president, and I was
Oh,
very
yikes.
very involved in a lot of things. And prom came around, And I was dating a girl who she was a dance instructor. And so when we started talking, she started talking to me about the prom. I said, well, I don't dance. And Drew, she said, that's okay. I'll teach you. That's what I do. I'll teach you how to dance. I'm like, well, no, I don't dance. And so, oh, no, just let the music move you. I'll help you. I'll help you. You know, you'll do great. I'm like, well, no, it goes deeper than that.
Yeah.
And trying to explain that to the girl that I was dating, my face is getting red even thinking about it. But my parents just broke down and said to me, okay, you know, we understand you're involved in everything at school. If you want to go, you can go, but you can't dance. Okay. I said, you know, I said, I just won't go. So the same as all the others, right?
Yeah.
But prom, right across the street, for the prom, all my friends were meeting at Michelle's house, right across the street from mine. And so they got all their prom pictures taken in the front yard right across the street from me. And so I thought I could just sit in my house, or, you know, I can just go over and encourage them, have a great night, and, you know, be safe and have fun and see them all dressed up. And so they took all these pictures. My mom went over with me. And I'll tell you, they took a picture of everybody with their prom dates. So I stood there with my mom, and they took a picture. My mom, I was kind of a joker, as you can imagine. Sent them all off, limousines. They all headed out. We walked back across. My mom didn't say anything to me. We went back inside of our house. She closed the door, and she was crying. And she looked at me and she said, I am so sorry. She said, but your dad and I just don't think it would be best for you. And I said, okay. I said, I understand. And while I disagreed with the decision, I never questioned that it was motivated from love. Now, did I let my kids go to dances? I did. You know, I don't think that's would have been the healthiest thing for them. And, you know, and I also don't see anything wrong with dancing.
Yeah.
But I guess what I would want to underscore is, even when a kid doesn't agree with the decision, if they can feel like that it is motivated by love, it makes it a little easier to swallow, because that relationship was there.
Right. Yeah. What a beautiful story. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
And
I haven't thought about that in years.
Yeah. And I think that's spot on, of a parent being a good parent, of not being so authoritative. Because from a 17-year-old's perspective, it's like you're slamming the hammer down hard, and you know that could have easily have created in you a hatred or just despising your
just
parents.
going the other direction. And that's
Correct.
why I think it's important for parents to realize, you know, that one thing we talked about: consistent discipline, frequent grace, and unconditional love. And the frequent grace piece is where some kids, that would devastate them, and they become the laughing stock of their, you know. Instead, I couldn't do anything to change it. So my nickname became Disco Dave. That's Saturday Night Fever had just come out with John Travolta 6 months before. So I just had to embrace it, you know. And in my personality, I could handle that okay. But I wouldn't want my son or daughter to be ostracized because of a preference or an opinion that I have as a parent. And so, yeah, I think there's times where, I'll give you another example. There was a time that my son, when he was in 6th grade, he didn't want to go to the youth program at church. And we went back and forth. I had just become the senior pastor of the church. Okay. So great timing. Thank you.
Yeah,
hey,
exactly.
His kids won't even go to church. No, he was there. He was there all the time. But on Wednesday nights, he just wasn't that crazy about one of the youth ministers in the program. And we were starting a Wednesday night Bible study for young adults at our house. And so I said, okay, here's the deal. You are in charge. of parking for everybody. You're the parking person. Anyone new, your job is to introduce them to everybody, make them feel welcome. And for anyone who socially just can't do it, you're the ping pong man, and your job is to be playing ping pong with them. So those are your 3 jobs. And he said, okay. I said, that's the only way. And what God did in the next 2 years on Wednesday nights in his life,
Mm.
with all of these guys that he poured into, and that poured into him,
Mhm.
it was just a highlight couple years of his life,
Mhm.
because they were sharp young people that he looked up to, and so he found himself, and they still feel a sense of ownership over him, and they still see Sam as being this tall because that's
Yeah.
what they think of when they think of him, and when they see him now, it's like, but that was where we had to give in because
Mhm.
we felt like that was best for him,
Mhm.
or else maybe he would have if we forced on that.
Yeah.
So we gave him another avenue of Christian service,
Mm.
and he was great.
Mhm.
It was a strange conglomeration. We had several professional athletes in the group. We had some guys who had played basketball at the University of Louisville
Mm.
and weren't Christians who came. And as soon as they would get there, they'd say, "Where's Sam? Where's
Mm.
Sam?"
That's
Because
awesome.
Sam was their security blanket.
Yeah.
I remember another guy who I don't remember what he did for a living, sharp young guy, Matt, and Matt didn't have the social skills. And so he had all these people looking for this kid, this 12-year-old kid when they got there,
Yeah.
because it was someone that they knew they could talk to. And then he was great at introducing people around. All of those things now he's using in real estate, all those things now he's using in ministry. And God used those 2 years as a
Yeah.
really, really pivotal time in his life.
Yeah, that's awesome. And how easily you could have just said, "Because I said so, you have to
Yeah.
go to Wednes," you know,
Yeah.
you could have easily have been that type of parent who was like, that could have said, "I don't care if you don't like it, you have to go,"
Yeah.
or you could have
Now, and
easily
I'm
have
sure I
used
did that sometimes, but
yeah, and
the tough
occasionally
thing was I just become the senior pastor.
right, correct.
That's what was the
Yeah,
tough part of
yeah,
it. It's like, well, this kid doesn't go to church.
right, exactly.
He's there on Sunday
Yeah.
all day.
Oh, I'm sure even that, like, the fact that you didn't use that as a way
Mhm.
of saying like, "Well, I just became the senior pastor. I just did
Mm,
this, so I need you to be here. You have to do it. No ifs, ands, or buts,"
mm,
and that could have definitely the next 2 years or could have definitely shaped your son's character in a different
yeah.
way where he says, "Well, I don't like church because it was
Mm.
forced on me rather than an invitation to go to."
I'll look back and say my wife probably had a big role to play in
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
And then I saw something in my son of, okay, then you're in charge of greeting everybody. And he
Mhm.
would give tours of the house. So wasn't a big house, but he's going to show his sister's rooms. I mean, he's going to go around and do all those things. And for a person who comes in and is overwhelmed by seeing 30 people that they have one friend there that
Truly, yeah.
invited them, Sam's job was to take everybody around, and then he would just introduce them around. So now he has become this incredible connector,
Mhm.
and I saw him doing it when he was 12.
Mhm.
You know?
Yeah, that's awesome. So and I'm assuming that he's very, welcoming to everybody. So
Yeah,
anytime he meets somebody new, it's he's excited to meet the person,
yeah,
which is really cool. And it goes back to, what you were saying of just that the progressive releasing. And does that make it would you say that would make it easier in the letting go process as they, progressed?
yes. There's two things that make it easier for the letting go.
Mhm,
One is what you just said, the progressive releasing,
mhm,
giving them more and more responsibility,
mhm,
giving them more and more freedom. So, you know, this curfew keeps changing each year, but if they prove themselves faithful with it, right?
mhm,
So you're giving them more and more responsibility so that now you're preparing them for when they go off to college and you're not going to be there,
mhm,
and they're going to be making their own choices. Will they make wise choices? So you'd rather them be doing that while they're still living in your home.
mhm,
Um, the second part for that easier transfer or releasing them I think comes back to whether or not you really have truly prepared them for going into the world. And that means spiritually, can they defend their faith?
Mm.
Um, that means, financially, are they a person who pays their bills? Is that something that you've got them accustomed to, working with their cell phone bill or whatever it might be? Um, and it's gradually stepping them into that. I've found that people who do a better job releasing are the people who have this end in mind when they start out.
Hmm.
And so if you realize I've got 18 years with this little one that God's entrusted to me, then I'm trying to set the stage spiritually. Now, there's this thing called free will that we didn't get to talk about tonight.
Uh,
And I know there's a lot of parents watching this and that heard the sermon that say, well, we did everything, Well, Proverbs 22:6, train a child in the way they should go. When they're old, they will not depart from it. That's a general principle. It's
mm,
not a promise individually that in every situation, because of free will.
mm,
And so we can't even say, well, yeah, but that means that at some point they're going to come back to the Lord. Well, it doesn't always happen that
mm,
way. But God didn't make us as spiritual robots. And there comes a time when your kids, they have to embrace the faith for themselves. And it has to move from being the parents' faith to being their faith.
right.
And that's what you're trying to pave the way for and lay the foundation. There's two things that make that happen. One is the parents being genuine and real
Mm,
and not putting on a false front about their faith. And the second piece is serving. There's a study that was done that revealed who had the best odds of keeping their faith after they graduated and went on into college. And it was the young people who had been involved in serving in some way. Maybe it was mission trips.
mm,
Maybe it was weekly serving in high school at their church with, child care or some other area. They were on a tech team, whatever it might be, but they were serving. And so those are things that are really important that we want to make certain that we're incorporating. Um, because if a kid can smell and sniff out whether or not Christ is real in a person's life, or if the parents flip a switch when they pull into the church parking lot and everybody puts on a happy face and they go into church, and then the second they pull back out, it's back to where we push the Lord back on the back
mm,
burner and put him in a drawer,
yeah.
shut the drawer until the next weekend.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's huge
Mhm.
for, I think, parents to understand, but also for children to understand as well, that just speaking from how I grew up,
Mm.
growing up in the church,
Yeah.
pastor's kid, I understood what it meant to be, what it meant to serve. But it did come to a
Mhm.
point where I was like, okay, well, I'm forced to serve, and it really not hitting me until I was probably like 19 or 20, when I had to find a church on my own, when I had to find community on my own, and I was definitely at a crossroads in that time where I was like, okay, I want to go into this avenue because it's going to feed my
Mhm.
fleshly desires. But I
Mhm.
know the way I was raised and the way I
Mm.
saw my parents live out their faith and how much they love Jesus and how much they love people and serving people and preaching the gospel and inviting people and praying
Mhm.
for people. Like just seeing all of those
Yeah.
things, that innate in me goes, I know, like I want to do these things that will feed my fleshly desires, because either I was hurt at that time or I was just in an
Mhm.
empty space of depression. And then I'd think about my parents and just the way
Mm.
they were, and I was like, "No, there's something bigger that
Yeah.
they serve that I need to serve, that this will not give me,
Mhm.
full joy, full satisfaction, like, it won't." And I just remember making those steps because of remembering what my parents taught me and keeping that love central. You said Jesus' love language is obedience,
Mm.
and that, like, struck a chord with me of thinking like, "Whoa, like, how do we learn to love Jesus?" And it's not a learning process to love him, but
Mhm.
it's out of obedience for what he's already done for you. and to know that even stepping in his presence, it's that overwhelming sense of love. So yeah, I want to
Mm.
be obedient. I want to be disciplined in the ways of Jesus so that way I could follow him. And that stems from learning how my parents did it, which is yeah, absolutely just powerful
Mm.
and joyful. But to kind of switch it a little bit, because a lot of families, a lot of parents will probably hear this and they will say one of two responses. One, they well either disagree, I guess, so three, but disagree, or they will immediately go, "We're terrible parents. Like,
Mhm.
I'm an awful father. I'm an awful mother. I didn't realize this." And they're coming to the conclusion, the reality of how they were
Mhm.
raising their kids. What do you say to those parents that are they don't really see in a hope in restoration, but yet at the same time want to restore things within their family, just broken families, and just like stuff like within
Yeah.
that, yeah.
Well, first of all, that's why I love to constantly stress that, there are no perfect parents
Mm.
and there are no perfect children. There's only been one perfect parent and perfect child, and society crucified that which was perfect.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
we've seen what happens so we don't run that risk that any of us are going to, but we have to realize that we're going to make mistakes. And as we learn, we grow. And I think one of the healthiest things is for parents to admit when they're wrong and to say, hey, you know what? I wasn't parenting real
Mhm.
well in that stretch of your life. And I'm going to ask for your forgiveness, and I'm going to try to do better. There are others who never had a good role model. Like you and I were very blessed,
Mhm. Right.
but that's not the norm, Drew. And you
Yeah,
know
it's
that, and
not.
I know that. We're
Mm.
more of the exception. We were very blessed that way. But I tell people, find someone who is a mom or a dad like you would like to be, and they're a few years ahead of you, and just pick their brain. Just say, hey, can I just take you to lunch? Can you give me some
Mm.
things? We have a Wednesday night Bible study that now is for young married couples. And so now you have this positive peer pressure from these couples that are lifting up each other and praying for each other. And, I'm thinking of a guy who didn't grow up in a faith background and really sees us as spiritual parents to him. And so he just says, I've learned so much from this group, from just being with this group. And so find some people that you can ask questions, find some people that you can just pick their brain and say, okay, what are two habits that you have as a mom or two habits as a dad? And how could I incorporate that into my life? How would my parenting change if I were to just do those two things? And so if you didn't have a great role model, I would tell you to find someone that you look up to
Mm.
and whose kids are turning out well, or
Yeah.
you say, I'd like our kids to turn out like their kids,
Mhm.
and pick the brain of those people and then employ those same spiritual methods that they used.
Yeah, yeah, that's important,
Mm.
definitely, and yeah, I feel like even coming out of your message to find mentors or parents or that role model,
Mm.
they follow those essential qualities of unconditional
Mhm.
love, frequent grace, and,
Consistent
consistent
discipline. Yeah.
discipline, and, yeah, just to be the hands and feet of
Mm.
Jesus and to really show that, I think is really huge, and hopeful for people who have messed that up, or
Yeah.
who are just coming in and realizing like, "Ah, yeah, I haven't been that great of a parent," or like, "Yeah, my parents weren't that great." But here's the hope is that Jesus is
Yeah.
here, and Jesus has shown that and given us that example. So he wants to draw you near to stuff like that or to him like that.
Yeah. I think of a phrase I say sometimes in sermons. He rebuilds, he restores, he redeems.
Mhm.
And I've seen him do that time and time
Yeah.
again with parents that look back over a season when they weren't walking with the Lord, or when the trauma went of a divorce or something was very difficult on the kids at a pivotal time in their life. and God just steps in. It's like that passage. He's a father to the fatherless.
Mhm.
He's going to step in and help out and make up that difference. And that's why the body of Christ is so important,
Mhm.
is because that only happens in the church.
Yeah.
You're not going to find that in other places. Yes, I hope there'll be some people at your kid's school. I hope there'll be some people in the
Yeah.
neighborhood, but the church is a place that it cares about them eternally
Mhm.
in the decisions that they're going to make.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I love the way, yeah, you said that. And I believe that through your sermon, through this series, I think a lot of parents are going to be hopeful for the
Mm,
future with their kids. A lot of parents that are going to have that restorative relationship back with either their kids who are older
yeah.
now. And so I definitely think it's going to be very healing. And so, of course, it's always good having you. Good talking to you.
I love One and All, and I'm excited for this series, and I know Jeff's going to knock it out of the park with the next one. So,
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I can't wait. Thanks.
see you later.